coming in with artificial intelligence and robotics that are driving the way we think and act in organizations. And how's the HR community at the forefront of this, leading that change? Whether it is talent that we're bringing into the community and are they aligned to what we need for the future of the organization, to how we use the technology to identify the right people to bring into the organization. So as we navigate all of these dynamics, I've got an expert panel that we have in front of us today. Today we're focusing on the insurance sector, and all of the experts that you see in front of you are from the different houses within the insurance sector. I will have the opportunity, in no particular order, will introduce first up Bronwyn Hughes, who's the head of human resources for Africa at First Equity Insurance Group. With a cross-sector background and people-first mindset, Bronwyn leads the HR strategy for the organization across the continent, championing culture, compliance, talent, growth, and high-performing environments. Thank you for joining us, Bronwyn. Next up, I have Masachava Matlali. She heads up International Learning and Development at Momentum Metropolitan. She's a strategic thinker with an MBA and over a decade of experience. She is evaluating workforce capability through innovation and learning and talent and development. Next in, we have Shivani Govinda. She's the Executive Officer, People and Culture at LegalWise, with a deep expertise in coaching, neuroscience, diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's a champion of conscious inclusion and culture transformation in the workplace. Our next panelist is from Sanlam, Sipho Gumbi, CHRO for Sanlam Investments Group, brings a Pan-African and global perspective to HR transformation. With over 20 years experience, is a firm believer that investing in people is the cornerstone for sustainable business development. And our final panelist this afternoon is Rejoice Kachipande, HR Director for SA Home Loans and the MD for Diadem Business Solutions. She blends strategic leadership and entrepreneurial insights with credentials from AGC Paris and Stanford. She's driving inclusive, agile HR strategies aligned with global and bold business transformation. Right. So I think our panel here, you can see, has a lot of continental experience, global experience, learning perspectives coming through from a global perspective, which we're hoping to share through this session this afternoon with the local context. Right. So without further ado, we're going to jump into our session. We do have an hour and a half set aside for the session. We may or may not use the full hour and a half. But again, welcome to the session to all of the colleagues that are listening to us this afternoon. So dear panel, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to throw out the first question. As I see your hands come up, I'll then jump through to you. And yeah, the floor will be yours. So the first question I kind of want to throw out to you is, so I've spoke a little bit about automation and analytics and robotics and that sort of thing. But I want to get a sense of how this is transforming the talent needs in the insurance sector. What roles are kind of evolving the fastest, and how is it impacting you? So I really want to get that sense from you about how all of these things are impacting you and how is it impacting the talent that's coming to your organizations in insurance. So yeah, feel free, would like to jump first. Okay, I see Bronwyn going up first and then Shivani, and I'll jump to Bronwyn and then Shivani thereafter. And then as the other colleagues come online to share their views, I'll give them the floor as well. So Bronwyn, those yours for now. You on mute?
Thank you so much, Michelle. So one thing that I have noticed in the insurance company is, and the roles that keep changing, is in regards to the claim processing and the underwriting support. We are no longer hiring people based on skills anymore, but we're more hiring for adaptability and learning agility and tech fluency. Because there's a high demand for data scientists, AI specialists, digital transformation leads, cyber risk analysis, and none of these roles used to be that important back in the insurance more than a decade ago.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Bronwyn. So very interesting insights. Not really about the skills anymore. It's about your adaptability, your learning agility, and your speed to be able to align to whatever the changes are happening in the environment. And that you at quite a rapid pace. All right, let me jump over to Shivani, and then I've seen Sipo go up and Tione thereafter.
Right. Yeah, to build on to what Bronwyn was saying, it's very much the same experience in the legal expenses insurance world, where what used to be also designated roles and functions are now starting to become more cross-functional, where we're looking for claims assessors, senior claims assessors, underwriters, even IT technicians to be a part of that entire process that never used to exist before. One of the most significant changes I've reported on from my side in the last 5 years is how we've had to redesign roles from the perspective of it being you start a process and it kind of ends and it moves on to someone else, to now having individuals with both a legal background and a claims background, because they're handling it from end to end. So there's a lot more focus on bringing it from the sort of fragmented role allocation to one that is far more integrated. So the individuals that we're now having to recruit need to come with a far more diverse skill background in understanding how the business runs. Our onboarding programs have had to evolve to that point too, where it's no longer just, okay, you've got your qualification and your skills and you can come and do the job. You now need to actually understand how the business works, because the work that you're doing has so many more touch points. Thanks, Shane.
No, fantastic, Shivani. So what I'm hearing here is either a duality of skills and a multiplicity of skills, right? And that's what you're kind of looking for now. It kind of makes sense as well, because you've got limited resources as an organization, rapidly changing roles, skills. So you need people, like Bronwyn stated earlier on, with the adaptability to be able to shift into different roles, different tasks, or be able to do multiple tasks at the same time. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shivani. Let's jump over to Sipo, and then we'll go on to Tione.
Yeah, no, thanks. I fully agree with my colleagues. And I was just reflecting on the topic, and if you just look at almost all the insurance companies, this kind of headcount is almost like flat in terms of growth. And when you look at what are the emphasis, and the emphasis is both around top line, is about the innovation for customer-driven and revenue generation, and then also on the efficiency side. But then what does it mean for talent? Definitely a move from traditional processing type roles to much more data-centric and tech-enabled functions. So as much as there's decline around manual underwriting, claims processing, as well as the shared services, and we're seeing huge growth in terms of data scientists, actuaries, but that are much more skilled in machine learning, much more around customer experience, but taking a very much digital product approach to it. It's not just generic client security, but of course, even issues of the security that goes with it, skills around cybersecurity, as well as regulatory technology, becoming very critical, because the balance between growth and actually managing the risk side of it is very critical. And obviously, you need a different mindset of agile type teams that are much more responsive, much more client-centric to drive that change.
Thanks, Sipo. So as you were talking there, I think it was kind of distracting to me, the type of skills that we require. They found more higher level skills that we require, no more those mundane skills that can do mundane tasks. You have those critical analytical skills that you're currently looking for. And it then kind of begs the question, does our schooling environment actually provide us with the skills that we need? So what does it mean for us as a community to be able to develop those skills? So I'm not throwing that question to you just yet, but we'll think about that a little bit later, right? But that's just what crossed my mind. Tione, I just realized, so we didn't quite introduce you very well, right? Tione, Group Executive at Old Mutual for HR. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Tione, please, the floor is yours.
No problem, Shane. Very much aligned to what people and the rest of the colleagues have said. Obviously, with automation being top of mind and the technologies that underpins that, some of the traditional roles aren't seen just as they used to be from a job profile perspective. So everything that Sipho mentioned, yes, those are some of the, the roles that we, from a predictive analysis and machine learning, those are the roles we do want to get in, and it's obviously the time for data scientists. But also, if we think of, we've got a massive sales force, and it is thinking of the skills of the future and the salesperson of the future, and how they need to have those, capabilities to utilize the tools that we're implementing for these efficiencies in the processes. It's also important just channeling or designing that job profile so that our talent strategies, acquire the right talent who could use the technologies that we're trying to implement. So other than all of those new roles that we're bringing in, we also just need to think of the big sales force and the type of skills that they need to utilize these new technologies, etc.
Fantastic. Yeah, so again, very interesting insights, right? As we think about this, everything is kind of talking to how we should be thinking and shaping our teams, right? Or the sector itself. That kind of leads me to the next point on my mind, which is all of us kind of in some shape or form mentioned agile teams or agility in the organization or agility in the roles and tasks and how we perform that, right? But what does this mean for a risk-averse environment like insurance, right? We're always too hesitant to make a move in a particular direction. We calculate all of the risks predominantly or first up before we decide to jump in 2 feet, whereas other industries probably sometimes jump in 2 feet because they're not as risk averse. So what does it mean for us in an agile, or to be agile in a risk averse environment like insurance? Mr. Charles or Rejoice, I see your hand is up. Are you responding to the previous question, or would you like to jump to this question?
I'm jumping to the new question.
Go for it.
I think it's quite critical that as an industry of insurance and as HR people, we look into how we are looking into the organization in such a way that we future-proof it, make sure that we're relevant for the future. And how we do that is by creating these skills that will be able to move with the times and be flexible and agile in such a way as to predict customer needs. And by that, I'm talking about we need to start reskilling our teams on how to use tools and models like design thinking, right? How do you anticipate customer needs? How to understand the trends in the market? For instance, right now, the plan is to look at, how, the risks in the insurance environment are impacting us. Sustainability has become a big issue and a topical issue. We're starting to see natural disasters. We're starting to see diseases like COVID impacting us. So we need people in our organizations that will be able to interpret this information and then predict how it's going to impact us. So the skills need to be agile, and then in terms of anticipating how we respond effectively to these challenges. So the type of skills we need to build into our organizations are such that they need to be responsive and agile to the changing ambiguous environments that we live in. So collaboration is also going to be key. How we work, the ways of working also needs to change. We're looking at teams that will be cross-functional. My other colleagues have already mentioned that we need to have a cross-functional team. We need to have cross-politan type of skills. We need teams that will be able to partner with the IT communities because digital skills are becoming more prevalent. We need people with actuarial skills that will be able to do this predictive analytics for us. Therefore, we need people that will not even though they don't have all the skills, because for you to function in this world of the future of automation, you need to have a blend of these complex skills. Collaboration is key because you need to be able to partner with different resources that have the different capabilities to be able to draw from in order to respond to the customer needs that are changing.
Fantastic, Rejoice. So what I'm hearing from you is that ability to have the tools in the environment that allows us to collaborate. So you spoke a little bit about design thinking. That's kind of one of the tools that brings people together, but also heard the point that we shouldn't forget the customer, and the customer is at the center of this, and that's what design thinking is all about, right? So whichever way we shape our organization, it still has to focus on how we service the customer, keeping that at the back of our mind, and then bringing in the agility and everything else that is required. The cross-functionality of the skills and the capabilities, and then also the ability to be able to partner with the IT community. And I think that was an important one, because it's not easy to partner with IT. They talk a different language, right? And sometimes it's a bit of a struggle to understand what they're talking about or to run through their process. But again, it talks to the agility of our skills to be able to learn and understand how to adapt. But it also talks to the IT community being able to learn and understand how to adapt to the rest of the organization and talk the same language. So there needs to be that coming together of minds between the two communities, right? So thank you for that, Rejoice. Before I jump on to, I think it was Bronwyn I saw, and then Giovanni, we have panelists join us, which is Kavita Ramji. Kavita Ramji is the CHRO from CoFace. And Kavita, if you're still online with us, you're welcome to put on your camera and join us on the live session. There we go.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Nishan, for the introduction, and apologies. I had some technical challenges actually getting in here, but thank you for having me.
No, fantastic. Thank you. So we're running through the questions, and feel free to throw in your responses as you wish. So I now have Bronwyn, Giovanni, Siko, and then up to Mr. Sharma. All right. So Bronwyn, floor is yours.
Yes, thanks, Nishan. And I just want to also touch base on what Rejoice was saying, because the conceptual shift, especially in customer experience and digital products that the insurance industry has experienced now, has pushed the industry to adopt such agile principles. And while you mentioned that we need to have cross-functional roles with IT, it doesn't just stop there, especially in the insurance industry. We've got to be cross-functional squads with the likes of compliance, underwriting, marketing, customer service, and build that all in together to ensure that the teams have the right mix of skills and soft skills to support this agile training and transition, and help shift performance management from the old traditional merits that we used to base it on, and make it more team-based goals for quicker outcomes. And I feel that's where the industry is leading to now, and that's why it's important for us to ensure that we're putting the right seats in the right places, and that we are not setting up any of our staff for failures, and that we're allowing them to not bridge the gap, to not open the gap, but maybe to more bridge the gap, especially in insurance.
No, fantastic, Bronwyn. And I think one of the important things that popped out as you were talking was the fact that it's technical skills and still soft skills. And that's a critical thing, right? Because at the end of the day, we know things like AI and robotics at the moment don't focus on things like creativity. And it's always around some of the analytical capabilities that you find the tools are very strong at the moment, right? So we as humans, we bring that base of both having the ability to combine the technical with the soft skills, and that's something that we shouldn't actually forget. As we develop and as we test and as we identify the right people to come into the organization, critical to have both as a seat, all right? Shivani, let's go over to you.
Thank you. So one of the things you mentioned when you posed the question to us is this concept of traditionally risk averse. And I can just say from a hand on heart, people and culture representative, it's incredibly painful when you're having to implement something that is of that nature. More than anything else, it's getting the decision makers to have the mindset of what agile means. Because what I discovered is that agile means different things to different people, depending on who you're speaking to. And when you're engaging with a group CEO as a CA, and you're engaging with a COO that's focused on the operations, and then you're engaging with a lawyer who's looking after legal, these things need almost a common definition before you can even start to talk about what that means for the structure and for how you organize your roles, because it means different things. And that's when often I think as HR and L&D and people in culture individuals, we face the biggest pushback, because it's our minds. You're dealing with years and years and years of this is how we did it, this is the process we follow, we're going to manage our risks in such a way because we've got reserving that we need to consider. And now you're talking about bringing in AI and technology and even things like yearly budget cycles that you used to do in the business. Almost need a bit of a rethink because you're moving at such a fast speed that the way that you did things, never mind how you structure your roles, also needs to change. And I found that that has been my biggest hurdle to overcome before even getting to the roles and responsibilities is the decision makers and their mindsets on what this means. And then of course there's the human response, right? Let me protect that which I can control. So now to get people to be cross-functional and redesign roles and bring in different perspectives means that I have to get into a state of discomfort. And so a lot of our time and energy has gone to actually help leaders themselves navigate what that world looks like before you can get to the implementation of it. Thanks, Jen.
Very interesting. Thanks, Shivani. As you were speaking, right? So agility means different things to different people, 100%. But interestingly enough, so I used to be an executive at one of the big banks, and I used to report into the exco, and I came up with the learning strategy for the organization, and a lot of it had to center around how we transition to the new skills that were required for the future. And it spoke about innovation and bringing a culture of innovation and how we embed that in the organization. It must be part of how we think and act without us really forcing our way towards it. And I put the proposal, and the proposal was kind of shot down. And I was like, guys, we're not preparing our organization. And the organization, one of the executives turned around to me and said, we got enough money to actually buy our way out of it. So if there's innovation that comes through, if there's a competitor, we'll think about buying them out. So again, it kind of, I hear what you're saying, Shivani, right? It's difficult to try and change the mindset. But that's probably the challenge I think we all are facing, right? How do we shape our motivations that this is what the organization should look like? But also really understanding that the time frame that we have, that we think is lengthy, may not necessarily be that lengthy to be able to shape the organization. We've seen from having open AI versus DeepSeek, and how quickly DeepSeek came in and changed the environment overnight, where we thought it was going to take a much longer period to get to the point of singularity. Experts are now saying that the point of singularity has been probably chopped between 5 to 10 years, just because of the introduction of a newer technology. It's faster, cheaper, and more efficient, right? Let alone all of the other technicalities. But again, some very nice points. Thank you so much, Shivani. Let me jump over to, it was Sipo, and then we go into over to Mr. Chaba.
Yeah, I think it's quite a strength that you are working in a highly regulated environment, because at the end of the day, it's the client, and this is policy holder money that we are protecting and obviously growing, depending whether you're in the short term, like insurance or in investments for that. But I think the biggest thing that in our environment that we struggle with is, how do you ensure innovation in a highly regulated environment while at the same time upholding compliance as well as regulatory standards? It's a tough one, because it's not just the people mindset that we're talking about, but it's also legacy systems. Most of the insurance companies are over 80 years, and have been building layers and layers of technology in that. So if you have to now come up with one single view of the customer, then you need a different skill set. So I agree with my colleagues around very cross-functional team, underwriters, marketing, IT. But I think we also see a lot around product owner skills coming through, but also issues around business system integrators, whose sole purpose is how do you integrate those things? And then obviously from a people side, what does it mean in terms of people and culture? So integration leads are becoming very hot skills to help in that. Before it used to be Scrum Masters, they are still important, but I think integration leads are becoming a hot skill in the environment. So if you have an audience here that wants to grow their career fast, that's the space that I really think it's a hot skill in the market. How do you integrate legacy system, cultures, and all that, so that for the benefit of the client? Because at the end of the day, it's about that.
Fantastic. Sipa, we're going to jump into a lot more of that, the traditional versus where the current industry is heading. But I think one of the critical things that you kind of said there for me was quite important, right? So I used to head up a learning function for an audit function within one of the banks. And we were looking at what the future of auditing was really going to be all about. And at the end of the day, at the time that we were looking at it, robotics and artificial intelligence was already there. Reports for audits could be done through the systems itself. And all it needed was the chief internal auditor to sign them off, and it was done. We didn't need a full-ish team like we did for auditing anymore. And that was starting to obviously get us to think differently. And what that meant for us was, how do we use the skills that we already have? We have people that have gone through years and years of one, studying to become auditors, and two, experience, years and years of working through an audit function. How do we then turn those skills around and use it for a different opportunity? And one of the things we were thinking of was taking the audit skills and introducing it right into the front end of the system. Audit was seen as the third line of defense. We now push it into the front end of the system where it's product development. And with the knowledge and understanding of the risks that need to be managed, you push that into the design piece, and you already, from a governance perspective, managing the governance issues you may face a little bit later on. But at the same time, you've repurposed the skills that may not necessarily be needed in the future, right? So again, some fantastic points. Thank you so much there, Sipo. Let's jump on to Mr. Shrava. Mr. Shrava, you're on mute.
Okay, apologies. Thank you so much, Nishan. Just to add on to what my colleagues have already mentioned, I think, and some people might find it a bit controversial, but I think that Agile is not new, right? Cross-functional teams are not new. We've been talking about these for many years. What it is now is that they've just become top of the agenda. We are now realizing that we cannot do without them. Like, we cannot, otherwise we're going to be left behind. If you look at the IT space, in the PMO space, they've been speaking Agile for a long time, and they've been practicing it as a way of work for the longest time. And I've been part of it. I'm trying to, reflect. I've been part of a lot of the strategic projects in many of the companies that I've worked in as a result of me being in L&D. And these projects were mainly led, by the PMO as well as IT. And as members of the project, we were forced to actually be agile. But what I found is that if you are sitting outside of IT and PMO, you struggled because you didn't have the capability. If you're in HR, we are great at hiring agile people with agile skills. We are great at upskilling them, but for us, we go like, that's not my area. And what this revolution has done, it's saying, as an HR person or as a support, employee sitting in finance or any other area, it's now important for you to have these skills, for you to be able to operate in a cross-functional team, for you to be able to understand what Agile is and be able to, implement it as a way of work for you, so that you can be able to deliver quicker, but also be able to deliver products that are effective and that are client-focused. In terms of risk, my thoughts are the insurance industry needs to see risk as an opportunity, not a deterrent. And what I mean by that is that you need to work with risk and not work around it. So if you think about, innovative projects, usually that happen in organizations where you would have a product person, a HR person, a PMO person, and somebody from, another department, maybe finance and so forth, being part of the project. A lot of times we tend to forget our compliance people or people that manage risk that will be able to advise in the project space and say, hang on guys, I see what you're trying to do, but there is this risk that you're not aware of. How about we do this way, incorporating the risk, and therefore we're still innovative, but we're working with the risk. And it requires a mindset change, which is quite necessary at this point.
No, fantastic, Mr. Java. I think one of the important things that kind of picked up from you there, apart from everything else that you said, was that if you look at the PMO community or the IT community, they've been practicing Agile, right? We were kind of forced into it when we got into a project, and that's how we kind of learned some of the Agile thinking, Agile philosophies. But at the same time, what I was really hearing there was that we were forced into it. And there needs to be that opportunity now where we actually don't wait to be forced into it. We should be stepping into it ourselves. We should be practicing it, jumping into it, changing the mindset. I think that's another thing that you kind of mentioned was one of your later points, which was that we've got to make that mindset shift. If we don't make the mindset shift, we're not going to transition. And then that's going to be one of our biggest failings, either as individuals and then as the larger organization. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Chava. Rejoice, I see you have your hand up, so the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. From my side, Nishan, I was just going to say Agile is the way of the future, because particularly in the South African environment where we have a huge shortage of skill, right? And it's taking quite long and a lot of investment in order to create and develop these skills. So if we learn as the industry and as HR people to learn from each other, share knowledge, and even not be afraid to share the skills, we will be able to sort of resolve some of the challenges that we're facing and be able to compete internationally, because those people have the big bucks. Now with the type of technology that's available in recruitment, we're now finding more and more international organizations coming to fish in our ponds. And if we don't protect the skills that we have by developing it, reskilling it, and making it more valuable and using it and utilizing it to its full capacity, we will have a brain drain. And our people will be at risk of losing jobs because automation is knocking on our doors. So I've seen successful strategies being implemented internationally where organizations are starting to partner. For instance, we are going to be looking more and more into digital skills and technology skills as we automate, which we don't have readily available, and to buy those skills is expensive. How about working across industries and as HR people, collaborate to see how do we combine our efforts in order to train people, and move them across so that they can learn across the industries, and then we bring them back into our original organizations to implement what they've learned. And for me, Agile means thinking bigger than ourselves. I mean, we can form industry cohorts that will be committed to building up skills for the future across the industry. That way we prevent job losses and develop it at the same time, and we develop the country and we increase employment, things of that nature.
Fantastic, thanks, Rejoice. You're kind of heading in the direction that I'm going to go to next, right? I do have Kavita. Let's take Kavita's comment and then we can shift on. I see Sipo's hand has gone up as well. Rejoice, your hand is still back up. I'm just checking if you still have a new comment to make. Okay, fantastic. So let me jump to Kavita and then I'll hand over to Sipo.
Yes, I just wanted to build on to what Rejoice was saying, and I work in a very fun space. So I work for one of 4 trade credit insurances or insurance businesses, let me say, in South Africa. So it's a very niche and it's a very technical space. So yes, skills are quite quite short in our area. And because I work for a global employer as well, let me tell you something, the South African skills are top notch. In the last year or two, I've had 10% of my workforce actually move on international mobility. So the skills are definitely there. The challenge is actually closing that gap. You spoke about the brain drain, and I 100% agree. It's not happening, it's happened already. It's really important to invest as a sector and as an industry in growing our own skills. Most people fall into the insurance space. It's not something that's chosen. It's not something that they wish to or aspire to be in. 90% actually just fall into that space and fall in love with it. But yeah, it's something that's definitely happening at the moment, and it's something you see more of. So definitely growing those skills. And then you also see the same challenges globally, political instability, the same sort of regulations, whether it's here locally or GDPR or EU legislations, DEI, they face with exactly the same challenges that we are faced with here within financial services, within insurance, and within the HR space. So it's really about, I think, having that common definition within your business in terms of what Agile means, aligning that to your business vision, mission, and strategy, and really executing on that. So deciding on what that looks like for you, and everybody being aligned to the same mission and vision. And that's how you're going to really future-proof your organization. That's how you're going to be change fit instead of change fatigue. And that's how you're going to upskill your workforce in the same breath as well. So it's really, it starts with us, and it starts with the business and what that vision and mission is from the top down, and then us supporting and executing within our roles.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kavita. So quite an endorsement for the skill sets that sit here in South Africa, right? And I think we kind of seen that because we've got a lot of individuals that have fantastic opportunities overseas. But that also kind of will lead me to the next point I want to get onto. But let me jump to Sibo before I get to that next point. And then I want to kind of tie up what I heard Mr. Shaba say, what Rejoice said, and as well as Kavita. So Sibo?
Yeah, I think the good shift around Agile teams as well, which I think is fascinating, is the fact that some of the roles that were seen as back office type roles are now becoming front end. So if you look at risk and compliance, they're no longer like support where you wait until your MVP, minimum viable product, is almost finalized and you go there for them to sign it. They're actually now part of the design to enable you so that as you move faster through your sprints, you are able to meet the quality standard. And I think for me, that's a very powerful thing as well, because the type of skills that you need in finance, risk, and compliance, it's kind of different. It's not people that are reactive, but much more proactive and a part of the building, the prototyping, and the design, not waiting for execution and then kind of sign off, which is exciting in terms of how that skill profile it's being looked at as well. I think for me, it's a great thing.
No, fantastic, Sipo. And thank you for that. I think one of the important things is to know and understand that you don't have to go that the minimum viable product and then go into the market space. The world has changed, right? You kind of you're researching, you're developing, you're designing, you're testing, and then you're chucking it into the market. And then when you're done with that, the cycle continues. So it's a consistent loop. So design thinking is not just all of the 5 stages in sequence. You're shifting between the stages as you go along, right? And then you reiterate and you go back to the whole cycle and you move along. So thank you so much for that, Sipo. Now, there's a lot of things that you guys spoke about that kind of started leading us to the next point I wanted to tap into is what are the talent strategies that we actually should use to start bridging these gaps? We've heard a number of you talking about bridging the gap, right? And we heard a little bit about not really hiring for skills, but going across the board, right? Or if we hire for skills, we're hiring for skills from a multiplicity point of view. So somebody that can adapt very quickly, right? But what does it mean for your talent strategies? And what I want to throw on the table is, as you think about this and as you respond, should we not also be thinking about changing our talent strategies that we actually don't have permanent employees, that we go for a particular skill or an opportunity for a particular project, you purchase the skill for a limited period of time. We do not have to lose people in the country. We can go globally and buy these skills for that limited period of time. And it could be 2 months, 3 months, complete the project, move on, and we don't have a permanent employee. It starts reducing our workforce expenses. So again, as we think about our talent strategies, I want to throw it to you and just get some thoughts from you. How do we bridge this gap between our legacy systems and the new talent strategies that we want to bring in for the future-ready workforce? Rejoice, I see your hand up. I'm not sure if it's because of this round or the previous round, but you're welcome to take the floor.
Okay, in terms of talent strategies, I think I've touched a little bit on that in order to future-proof our organizations. It's important that as we digitize, that we remember that people are going to be a little bit apprehensive and might even resist change because out of fear of what this automation is going to bring and what it's going to do. So if we are very upfront about what we want to do, what we want to achieve, and prepare the organization beforehand, before the changes do come, we have the opportunity to implement things like strategic workforce planning, where we understand, what we're going to need from the industry, understand what the client is going to need in order to prepare adequately and create the skills and the capabilities. So it's a combination of building from within the skills and reskilling and making sure that people are ready for what's coming, and then making sure that you partner with institutions like yourselves, Nishan, and make sure that we partner together in saying, I come to you and say, these are the skills and shortages that I think I have, and I'm going to need these skills. Let's build, and you build programs appropriately to design for that. But then also looking at what's required, you also need to say, do I build within or do I acquire the skills externally? Then based on that, you craft the appropriate strategy for talent. But I think most importantly, we need to look after our internal talent and make sure that we build the appropriate skills internally. Career pathing plays a big role. We need to also understand where our people's internal strengths are, because machine learning is just the tool. It's not the entire solution. So we still need humans to be able to deploy the services that we need to lend out there in the market. So competencies that are going to be relevant in the future, we already have. It's just how we harness the talent within and come up with appropriate strategies that will help us and that will enable us to get there faster.
Yeah, fantastic, Rejoice. Hearing a lot about focusing on the internal and using that as your core before you start looking at tapping into strategies on the outside, but also to have the bespoke solutions that help you build the capabilities you need internally. So if you're building that core, the other thing I heard you say is, do we really know who we have in our organization and the capabilities we have, right? So that's also something very critical. Have we done the necessary assessments to understand what we have in the organization to build up our core? Right? Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rejoice. I saw Dione, Shivani, then it was Bronwyn, Mrs. Shava, and then Kavita, but I'll call those names out again. So let's give Dione the floor, then Shivani thereafter.
Thank you.
you, Nishin. I think it's important, obviously, to align to the strategy of the business to see where they are going, and then bridge the gap by having a multifaceted talent strategy. I think, controversially so, the concept of the polished jobber is already in practice. We hire, people that come in to do a specific skill, or partner with people who do a specific skill, just to get that moving. But it's still important for us to have a consistent employee experience and still build a culture. So therefore, permanent employees, I think, are still needed for that. So definitely multifaceted talent strategy, and obviously big focus on digital innovation and automation. We were talking about machine learning as a tool for insights and predictive analysis, but it's utilizing those insights for attrition. It's getting automated processes for our attraction. They're talking about, it's actually been done quite a long time ago, where they do video interviewing and then you can review it at a later stage, or automated coaching, where you don't now have to sit in the car or, one-on-one and coach someone. So those tools are very important, but it still needs a human element, and therefore that multifaceted talent strategy is important, and to incorporate and should be incorporated to underpin that employee experience that we're looking for, because we know that happy employees are productive employees at the end of the day.
No, fantastic. Thanks, Theone. So an important thing that I picked up from you is that we need to know the company strategy to be able to build our strategies, right? And it makes sense. I think we've learned this in strategy 101. What's the organizational direction, and then you shape the rest of your strategies based on that. But part of the challenge I'll also throw on the table for us to think about as we move ahead is, how do we not just build it from what the company is thinking, but how do we input or inform the company strategy itself? So how do we take what the trends are from a people perspective and say to the organization, you want to head in that direction, but unfortunately, I think this is the way we need to head. So that starts playing more of that HR strategic role, that we actually inform the strategy right from the beginning. So that's kind of a challenge I'll throw onto the table for us to think about. Right, Shivani, let's jump over to you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point you raised there, because I think for the longest time we've always thought about it as, who are the right people on your bus, right? So you've got a bus, you've got it functioning in a certain way. If I stick with that analogy, and how do I fill those seats with the right individuals? I think we're having to relook at, do we even have a bus anymore? What does that look like based on who actually wants to work and wants to be part of something? Because I think how I've experienced a lot of individuals post-COVID is, there's been a shift in my association with my employer, the meaning I got from my work, my sense of belonging, all those things that to me contribute greatly to what talent is looking for and how you're going to retain it into the future. So sometimes trying to make a recipe without the right tools means that you not need to look at the recipe, but what is it that you're using? I question, and it may be the unpopular view, if the tools that we're using around even strategic workforce planning, and how we have viewed succession planning, and how we have as HR professionals considered the way that we do our budgeting and our cycles and our personal development plans, is still even relevant for the new talent that is coming in. Because do they even see themselves in those roles? Do they see themselves moving up into those positions? Are we creating a kind of vehicle that doesn't suit the driver? Because at the end of the day, that's who we're looking to build with these talent strategies. So I think there's a few things that are lagging behind that almost need a bit of a rethink, including outside African laws, how we view employment relationships, how we view performance management, and the whole consideration of what happens when we do dismiss someone, how contracting actually happens in an organization. Because I think it doesn't yet for me feel like there's a good marriage that exists between what our needs are from moving towards being future ready and the existing infrastructure when it comes to law, employment relationships, how we manage people, how we connect them to purpose, to a vision, to a culture. I feel like that's still lagging behind. There's not enough work has been done to bridge that gap, because maybe we don't yet fully understand really what people are looking for. because we have the situation where you're sitting with huge generational gaps between those who are considered experts and who are now running those teams, and this new entry coming in that's saying, hey, I actually don't want that kind of working relationship with you because my needs as a human, from a career perspective, are actually being filled somewhere else. So I don't see myself staying with you for that long duration.
And that's a very interesting points there, Shivani. And I think you spoke about the bus there, right? And a lot of times we think that we throw people under the bus because they don't fit in with the organization or the direction the organization is heading in. But there's also the other perspective that the individuals themselves throw themselves under the bus. They have a different way of thinking, a different way of acting, and there isn't the alignment between the organization and the individual. So it becomes difficult to try and manage the two. At the same time, we also mentioned much earlier on changing the mindset of the executive leadership, right? Because we know culture stems right from the top. And if you don't change that, and I have these challenges as well in my organization, I've got the board that I report into, and the board has a particular way of thinking. And then the organization with the younger force that's coming in thinks very differently. And trying to marry the two becomes very difficult because you become the middleman in between that, right? So it then means that we've got to start changing the way we think of the board at that particular level and shaping it. Now, interestingly enough, I started my career with Old Mutual, and I used to train financial advisors. And the one thing that I used to train them on was the fact that when you sell something, you're not selling the features of that financial policy, you are actually selling the benefits of that policy. So I've started using that as a strategy now when I do my presentations to the board. It is, here's what I'd like you to do, and here's the benefits of why I would like you to do that. And I'm slowly seeing a level of change within the organization simply by using a simple strategy like that. But thank you so much for that, Shivani. I'm going to jump over to Bronwyn, then to Mr. Chava, and then we'll close up with Kavita on this point. Bronwyn. You're on mute, Bronwyn. Sorry.
There we go. One of the most common things that we in HR are seeing today is that our most valuable employees are the ones that can adapt. And I know that we've been chatting about doing transitional roles. A lot of the time that's frowned upon because when somebody's in an industry or when they feel that they're good at a certain role, they're quite narrow-minded and stick to what their role does. They don't understand that their role, it leads to the next division and the next division. So having somebody team up together, like in a senior role, say a senior underwriter with a junior broker, just so that they can understand how their work leads to their work. And then that can obviously take away the breaks down that alignment and fosters the team to work towards an us mindset rather than a them mindset thinking. And it's also good for succession planning in the future because there's no point in us bridging these skills now when we're not thinking about the succession or the future of where the industry is actually going. And I think it was Rejoice that mentioned that resistance is scary and it's there and it's a human thing to feel that way. But as scary as what it is, resistance is inevitable. So we need to kind of form a culture inside of our workplace that let's the employees know that we are continually learning, we are continually upskilling, and it needs to be a mindset across the board. Thank you.
Very interesting. Thanks, Bronwyn. What that kind of means is you're shaping your organization to be a continuous learning organization. And to be a continuous learning organization, how do you embed that into the culture? That it's kind of second nature. And kind of the direction that learning is kind of shifting to in organizations is micro learning, right? Short bite-sized pieces of learning on a consistent basis that individuals are fed with. Whether it is when you jump onto your computer early in the morning and it says, "Good morning, Bronwyn, how are you doing this morning?" And then the next piece is, "Did you know?" And you get a little learning piece. And then somewhere midday, just as you're getting to lunch, you get another pop-up. And then in the afternoon, you get a pop-up. You jump onto your phone, you get these different learning pieces jumping up on your phone. It's kind of thinking about that to really shape the organization to be agile. Because what you're doing is you're keeping people continuously learning. It becomes part of the culture. So when new information comes in, they feel like they really want to grab onto it and adopt it. Right? Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bronwyn. Let's jump over to you, Kavita. Thank you.
Yes, so I think it was, I don't know how to say her name, but Danae, who touched on it, where she said, you know, you have to have a multifaceted talent strategy. And again, it comes to that, you know, I agree 100%. It comes to that cross-pollination and cross-skilling, especially working in a global organization. You leverage off expertise, you know, globally within the world, and you get that natural cross-skilling with your local teams and through your individual employees as well. So it's really, really important because, and the point is, I mentioned this because it's not just a war on talent, it's a global war on talent now. You've got remote working, you've got hybrid working, you've got remote skills, and these are things you really need to leverage on. If it's not in your strategy, it really should be. You should be looking outside as well for these skills to upskill your workforce, your employees here as well. And you know, having said that, it's also about having a really good retention strategy. Coupled with that, I would also say, you know, and you touched on it, Nishan, where you said, you know, they call it like the gig economy, where you have certain individuals actually come in and they are specialists and they are really good at what they do, and they work on a specialized project or initiative. And it doesn't really take away from your core employees or your core workforce. If anything, it's making the business very, very efficient. You're not pulling your employees out of their normal work or their normal daily work to work on a project now, something additional, which is going to take them, I guarantee you, double the time that somebody, you know, the gig economy or digital nomad workforce will do in a month or 2-3 months, you know. So it's really leveraging off those efficiencies and having a multifaceted talent strategy. I could not agree more. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Kavita. Again, I think, we're also talking about agility in our strategy now, right? So we've spoken about agility in the organization, and what I'm hearing from you is agility in the strategy and the ability to be able to adapt and swing when and how you need it according to that particular context that you're operating in. So thank you very much for that, Kavita. Mr. Chava, close us out on this point.
All right, thanks, Nishan. I was worried that you forgot me there.
No, I didn't.
I think part of having a multifaceted talent strategy is making sure that we create talent marketplaces, and that would require us to have skills-based organizations. But how do we then, and I think over and above skills-based organizations, we need to also make sure that we have diversity and inclusion. But how do we go about doing that? As HR, we need to make sure that we've got the right systems that will enable that. I don't think we are there yet. And that would mean that we need to be agile as HR. We need to have the right processes that will enable and the right people in HR that are upskilled, you know, appropriately, but also policies, which is I think one of the areas that HR excels in writing policies. But we need to write policies that will enable or that will allow us to build a future fit organization today. I don't think our policies are there. So it's about really starting with the most basic things. And that's how we bridge the gap. But then also we spoke about, making sure that those that are approved or those that have the right power to enable for us in the organization have the right mindset. Diversity and inclusion is going to be key at a senior level, at an exco level. A lot of the excos or the boards, when you look at them now, and yes, we appreciate wisdom, but we lack diversity. Forget about color. Let's talk gender. Let's talk age. If you want to challenge mindsets and have the right innovation, you need young people in there that are going to say, something's wrong with the strategy. It's not talking to the future and where we're going. This is talking to, where we're coming from and where we are now. The generations that are coming in now in our organizations are your Gen Zs and beyond. These are the people that should be well represented
in the spaces where decisions are being made. Then there's also a thing for me, something that is quite important is about beyond representation is making sure that they're able to influence and make the decisions that will take our organizations forward. So for us in Botswana, so you know that I support all our non-South African operations. So what we've done in Botswana is that our organization is not big, right? We can't have our young people at Exco at the moment. We're working on it, right? So what we then did is that to bridge this gap, we thought about how about we have reverse mentoring. Okay, let's create another Exco. And this Exco, we're going to call it a junior Exco. This Exco is going to form part of our normal Exco and be able to influence decisions for the non-represented, for the digital young employee, which is who are the future. And I think that it's really worthwhile in our Botswana business that we're thinking about even, scaling it to our other countries to say, let's make sure that there is this representation. So diversity and inclusion and many other things that I've mentioned will bridge the gap.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. So interesting. So first, when you started, you spoke about the skills marketplace, right? And the skills marketplace could be both internal to your organization and external. So at another bank, so I worked with a few banks, right? But one of those banks, what we were doing was we actually had what we call the skills cloud. And this was our internal marketplace. And predominantly it was the IT community that was sitting on this, but we were trying to expand this out to the rest of the organization. But it was the opportunity to tap into that skills cloud and say the individual kind of captures their CV on it. As they build up their skills and capability and experience, they drop that into this little skills cloud. And then if anyone from the organization was looking for a particular skill, they could tap into the skills cloud, type in, I want data analyst or whatever the sort, and it brings up a pool for them to kind of choose from. And then they could go and pull individuals for a particular project. So they didn't have to be permanently employed in a role in that organization in a particular function. They could be permanently employed by the organization, but not in that function. And they could be pulled into different functions, right? And you do the same thing for a skills marketplace that is kind of outside of the organization as well. So very interesting points there, Mr. Chaba. The other thing was you spoke about reverse mentoring. And it kind of reminded me of our last seminar that we had, or webinar. One of the mining houses, what they were doing was they had a mini board. And the mini board was the younger generation of the C-suite as well as the board itself. And they were kind of being mentored, and the mentorship was going both ways. But what it did was it allowed for younger thoughts, younger ideas, fresher ideas to shift up to those that were more senior than them, and then to have it go down as well to also learn. Because I think it's very easy for us to say we have to adapt to the new skills coming in, but at the same time, I think it has to be both ways. The new skills coming in have to adapt to the environment that they're operating in, inform that environment in terms of how to shape for the future. So it's kind of a two-way thing, that you bring a balance rather than trying to say, no, the organization has to shift. There must be a shift in two ways to bring balance, right? So I think very interesting points. So thank you so much, Mr. Chaba. And it kind of leads us onto our next little question that I'd like to throw out to you. So HR has a lot of analytics, right? And I think we kind of have these data points on the people in our organization, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of information sitting outside of our organization. How do we use all of these analytics to inform what our talent strategies are going to be? So how do we recruit better? How do we retain better? How do we change our employee engagement, right? So we know two sources of data, internal, external. How is that informing your talent strategies? And I think, Abita, you were kind of leaning onto exactly that a little bit earlier on when you were talking about the strategies that you guys are using. So maybe you want to jump first.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's building your brand in the market, so being an employer of choice. So I'll talk about internally. I think some metrics that are just a simple go-to, things like having an engagement score, how you measure it, the action points, and I think just more organically. So that's from a data perspective, but I feel like, the real value also comes in from having meaningful and organic relationships with the people in the business. So just in terms of feedback about what they think of the brand, where you can be doing better. A simple question I always say comes down to, would you refer this organization as an employer to somebody else outside? Is a quick test to see whether somebody really is enjoying the space that they're working in and really believes in and buys into the vision and the mission of the organization. But yes, coming back to data, I would say engagement surveys internally, positioning yourself in the market as an employer of choice, that organically happens. And when that happens, you then so you get referrals coming through to build your strategy internally, and you also get like-minded individuals who work very well together. So I would say number one, really positioning yourself as an employer of choice, and it starts internally with the engagement metrics, engagement data, and then also looking at why people are leaving. So we know attrition rates, are some of the stats or some of the data. Exit interviews, a little bit more questionable from in terms of the actual feedback and data you're getting from that one. But yeah, I think just really looking at change in terms of attrition, staff turnover, those are really important metrics. I think you would start as a starting point and looking at internally, and then externally, I think just also ensuring reward recognition, those sort of things are critical for retention. So I would absolutely recommend like salary benchmarking, ensuring you have correct job profiles, jobs, looking within the industry as well. I think that's critical for me externally. So yeah, I would say those are starting points for me. But you kind of put me on the spot there. So
yeah. Well, you did very well. Thank you so much, Kavita. But I think critical is you kept mentioning metrics, and the metrics are very important. So as long as you have those data points, you can kind of make the right decisions, if you put it that way. So many years ago at another bank that I used to work at, for me to get into the organization, what they did was they actually did a personality assessment and a leadership assessment, which created the metric points that they were looking at. And they had done this already within the organization and the team that I was kind of stepping into. So they already had a map of that team, and they kind of overlaid the competencies that I would bring into the organization to see if there was a fit, an alignment, or a match. And when I say fit, alignment, or a match, they weren't expecting it to be the same. They were expecting it to be different, so that I could bring a diverse mindset, diverse skill set into that team. But then it's kind of giving you the sense of how you could use some of that data to make the right decisions, to bring the right skills into the organization, to balance out the organization. So thank you so much, Kavita. I'm going to hand over to Sipo and to Dione. I've seen your hand up. So we'll go from Sipo to Dione.
Yeah, so addition, your question around how do we leverage data analytics to drive recruitment, retention, and employee engagement. It's a tough one, but I think an area, for example, I'm in the Sanlam investment space, very much focused around intensive knowledge workers. I think if you just look at the metric for that, almost for every 3 million rand profit coming from one employee. So how do you retain such talent? So predictive analytics is a very key one for us to reduce attrition, but also to bring harmony in the business. Because what I've seen is if you have a reduced retention, it's a good indicator of how employees want to be with you. But also it helps you to minimize any pay parity, because if you have to go out to get the same skill, you pay a premium for it because it's come from outside, and that creates disharmony in terms of your own internal pay parity as well. So we use predictive analytics a lot to make sure that we focus on the internal marketplace, like my colleagues have said, and of course replenish skills where it's required by going outside. But the focus is really inside as well. And there's the upside of it obviously is your spend per dollar for recruitment and stuff like that as well. I think the other area around AI in recruitment, just not only to improve job candidates, but we are an impact investment business. We believe that if employees are not employed in our space, but let's create opportunities for them through other opportunities, even in partnership with government, like through Business Unity South Africa. So having those tools that help us to say, even if you're not getting a job within our space, but channel you to other platforms where you can get jobs, because I think we all have a responsibility from a corporate citizenship point of view, not to only create jobs for our companies, but also to look at how we reduce employability in South Africa as well. I think the other thing around just workforce analytics, what we've seen coming back to Agile workforce, is just the power of using workforce planning, but bringing the right people. So in our HR team, we try to make sure that we rotate business people from the business, data scientists to come to us because they look at the world differently from us, marketing to strengthen our employer brand positioning and all that stuff. So even just having a boundary-less HR, as in you're not a traditional HR and therefore there, but having a cross-functional Agile team that rotates, understand the human side of things, but helps you as well to make sure that HR solutions are very much products and solution more than just processes as well.
Interesting thoughts there, Sipho. And sometimes maybe we don't see these things, but the fact that focusing on the internal actually helps the business and the organization also reduce its cost, because if not, it then creates the disparity in your pay lines, right? So some very interesting thoughts there, and using things like predictive analytics to be able to develop the capabilities that you want, which then strengthens your core or strengthens your internal focus. Some great points there. Fantastic. Thank you. Let's jump over through to you, Dione.
Thank you. And I mean, very similar thought process to Sipho, but just to build on it, if we look across our human capital value chain, we can collect analytics from each process, right? Whether it's time to hire, from a attraction perspective, whether it's culture survey, feedback, whether it's exit interview analysis. In each of those, there is feedback or data analytics that we can get, but it's the insights that matter. And I think the future is predictive analytics and getting it all together and making certain assumptions so that there's an algorithm that can say, okay, this person is possibly likely to leave, because if we look at all the different data points, but currently everything is just all over the place, and therefore we don't utilize the insights correctly. I also want to say, in the world of data analytics and how everything is about the technical proficiency and understanding those insights, we must never forget those qualitative data. I know people say exit insights, it's tricky, but I do believe we still need to value those focus groups, skip level meetings, keep our finger on the pulse through conversations, because yes, the data and the predictive analysis is probably 70% true, but we still need to keep our finger on the pulse, and that's why the human element is still important. It's just the point I want to make on that.
Thanks, Dione. While you were chatting, or while you were sharing with us your thoughts, it kind of led me to another thought. Are we as HR professionals, do we have the right skills to be able to step into all of the things that we need to do? So we talk about analytics and predictive analytics and data. Do we understand these things? Do we have the capability to actually sift through that data, or do we rely on skills outside of the team? So again, it kind of just says to us, are we skilling ourselves as the HR community to be able to do what we need to do to support the organization? But that was just a thought that kind of just crossed my head as you were chatting between Sipho and yourself, Dione. Thank you very much for that. I saw Shivani's hand go up and then Rejoice. So Shivani, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just 3 points that I want to add to that. I think it's about the sense making from the perspective that what you are measuring sometimes can tell you a different story depending on how you connect the dots. I'll use a little story that sometimes our sales individuals will say things like, you just have to keep refreshing the system to get the numbers to tell you the story that would be more positive. Because sometimes even those kind of data robust measurements, when interpreted from a different perspective, can tell you a different story. So a big part of what I think we as HR professionals need to do is take a step back and also ask ourselves, with all these measures that we have, are we spending enough time in the sense-making space? And not just in like what I find in my own role, so much of reporting that happens. There's this constant need and churn for that, and not enough time spent in the meeting where we actually discuss what does this mean for us and what are potentially some of those not yet showing on the quantitative measures that we should be looking for. And it kind of dawned on me in a recent workshop that I attended where they spoke a lot about how we've been very much forecasting and not looking at foresight. And foresight is more tricky because it requires you to approach it from an art perspective, not from a scientific perspective. You have to almost imagine what the future looks like and then look at your data points, as opposed to forecasting, which tells you that's what's going to happen. So I feel like there's this need for a good mix between the quantitative measures and the qualitative ones. And my last point on this is something that I'm working on in the next month is a listening strategy. Because I think that we have a lot of measures that we do that are, we budget for them every year, we have pulse surveys that we run, we have got absenteeism rates that we track. But do we have a more overarching listening strategy that says, are we listening to all the different committees and all the different voices? And some of the stuff that maybe we can't quantitatively determine, but is already giving us indicators of where people are at. Not just from what historically has happened, because that's the problem with exit interviews, right? Like, okay, so that's great, but now I can't do anything about it right now. How are we listening to almost not just predict, but determine what the future could be? And does that listening strategy speak to qualitative measures in addition to the quantitative ones? Thanks.
Okay, fantastic. Qualitative versus quantitative, but you're also kind of leading on to what does this future kind of look for us? And that's how I kind of want to close out the session this afternoon. Interestingly enough, colleagues, the time has flown by. We actually had 20 past 1, right? So I'm going to start rounding up the conversation with 2 questions in particular, right? The first one is really just going to focus on, we've spoken about this probably many times. We've had different conferences where we sat down and we speak about those that can't come onto the bus, right? And then we mentioned the bus earlier on. And those that don't come on, they kind of throw themselves under the bus. Is there anything else that we can do for these individuals that are resisting the change that is required? Now, interestingly enough, like I mentioned earlier on, we've got a little bit of resistance at the board level as well, right? Because we're trying to change mindsets. So we've got resistance from right at the top. We've got resistance at our level. We've got resistance below us. How do we work our strategies so that we start reducing the resistance at each one of these levels? So I want to throw that to you before we start talking about what does the HR function of the future look like? And you can talk about it from the insurance perspective. You can talk about it from an agnostic perspective in terms of industry, but what does that HR function look like? So let's open the floor to how do we manage this resistance at all the levels of the organization. Shivani, I saw your hand go up there first. So let's jump to you and then Rejoice very soon after.
So one of the things that has changed, not just how I lead and how I engage with our ExCo and our board, but also how I parent, is the time to think methodology by Nancy Klein, which speaks directly to what are the limiting beliefs that we potentially are holding in ourselves that is holding us back. And I have found around the first question that you asked in terms of working with that resistance to change is you have to get to the root of what is the limiting belief. What is the belief that I hold that is true? And how do I overcome that? Because often at the seat of it is fear. it's somehow other kind of fear about what this change is. And unless we're willing to do the hard work from a personal mastery perspective that forces us to almost question what are those beliefs that I've been holding, I'm afraid from what I've observed, you're never going to get to that point where there is an acceptance of anything new, because that personal mastery, that self-awareness for those decision makers hasn't taken place for them themselves to be in a position to now say, okay, I can actually be okay with my resistance to it. I acknowledge it. Thank you.
Very important point. So one of the things we do as Regenesis is in all of our programs, we build in this little module called conscious leadership, which talks to exactly what you're talking about. Because if you're not able to understand internally, you're not able to make the external changes that you need. And it goes to that point of internal locus of control versus external locus of control. If you keep on looking at the external point, you will throw yourself under the bus. But the moment you start looking on the internal perspective and shaping your mindset from that perspective, you tend to be far more successful, far more agile, and fit into what is required. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Giovanni. I think it was Rejoice. And then once we're done with the Rejoice, I saw Master Charles' hand go up.
Thank you, Nishan. I think it all boils down to, and I agree with what has been said earlier by my colleague, it's all about the why. I think most of ourselves as the leaders, when we want to implement changes, that we always like make the change happen without really thinking about the impact that it will have on the people. That is why they end up resisting. So if you cannot explain the why, it's going to be very difficult for the people to accept the change, because people are change fatigued. There is a lot of change that is currently happening across industries, and with digitization and AI and all of that, there's going to be even more changes. People are change fatigued, and that is why they're resisting. So until we answer the question why we're doing this and what impact it's going to make, we're going to continue experiencing resistance. So we need to ourselves as the leaders answer that question to them. And we also need to think about how we implement. We cannot keep thinking about deploying big changes in a big way, because most of us tend to think if you implement quickly, do these big changes, then quicker results. A wise person has always said, and I'm sure you've heard this commentary before, if you want to get there quicker, go there alone. But if you want to get there, you need to take the people with you, and you need to, and that means slowing down. So we need to think about slowing down for the sake of the people, because we want to take them along with us, right? If you want to go far, you need to slow down and take everybody with you. So it's about making incremental changes, slow it down a little bit, making sure that you have the buy-in. If you have the buy-in, then you're going to have the accountability, and you're going to have the ownership, because people will be excited. And then you also have to give them a platform to give input. If you want people to take ownership and accountability, you got to make them part of the journey. So if they're part of the journey and they give their input, then you will be able to get there faster. And then we need to be empathetic, because we do a lot of change to the people, and we don't think about the impact it has. I already mentioned that, and how they feel about it, because it's all about emotion. What's in it for me? Nobody cares about me. That is why I have to go through this. So why should I change? So you need to answer what's in it for you. So you need to show, you said it earlier, Nishan, you need to show them the benefits, the strategy, and the benefits. With customers, the same issue. If you want to sell a product, you got to tell them what's in it for them. If you can't answer that question, forget about it. So that's that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rejoice. I think the absolute gem that you popped up there is understanding the why to help shift that mindset amongst the others that you dropped for us. So Thank you so much, Rejoice. Let's go to Mrs. Sharma and Bronwyn, and that will take us very close to our closing minute. And then I'll just give you guys like 30 seconds to kind of just say what you think the future kind of looks like for HR. Where's Mrs. Sharma? She kind of disappeared. There we go. Mrs. Sharma, close yours.
Thanks, Nishan. I think Joyce has mentioned quite a lot of points that I wanted to cover, but I think at the core it's about making sure that your process is inclusive and you're taking people along the journey with you. And how do we do that? To Shivani's point, is making sure that you are listening. People just want to be listened to. You don't have to implement everything that you're listening to, but they want to know that you are listening. And yes, it's about understanding those assumptions and those core beliefs that they hold and saying, okay, if this is the assumption that they're making, how do I then, shift them from that? How do I create awareness? How do I create this desire for them to want to be on this journey with us? And there are many ways in which you could do that as HR professionals. But like Rejoice said, it's about the how. I think we do great at sending emails and having posters and these digital videos. Perfect. But I think a lot of people really want, like I said, to be listened to, but they want the connection. It's about engaging the people, going back to these skills, these things that make us human in this era of digitization. Let me hear you one-on-one. Let's talk about this. I think for me is key. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic, Mr. Sharma. Let me jump over to Bronwyn. And Bronwyn, you can answer this question, and then you can also just close us out with your thoughts on what the future of HR looks like before I jump to the other colleagues.
Okay, perfect, thanks. So what's something that we cannot deny is that automation is here to stay. It's not here to replace us. It's challenging us to level up. The future of insurance, high tech, but it's also deeply human. The HR department of the future is not just an administrative hub. It's a change partner and a cultural architect and a strategic enabler. But not everybody is excited about this future, and we've brought this up before. Our biggest challenge is navigating the resistance, especially from unskilled employees and long tenured employees who've seen waves of changes and feel weary or kind of left behind. So to move forward, the HR must balance tech adoption with trust building. And yes, we will be powered by cloud-based systems and AI-driven analytics, but behind every dashboard is still a person, and that's something that we need to remember. And that means that we need to blend digital with empathy. We deal with people during rough times, which AI doesn't do empathy. We do. And that's a personal touch is what builds trust. So I would say for the HR of tomorrow, we are deeply integrated into the businesses. We co-lead workforce planning using data, but we also coach leaders through these transitions. We design reskilling pathways and we create inclusive people-first experiences. When resistance arises, we learn not to ignore it. We listen, engage, and show people where they fit in this world of work and create a psychological safety so that teams can test, fail, and improve.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bronwyn. So, and another couple of gems that you dropped there. Let's just go around the room very quickly, colleagues. And in 30 seconds or so, tell me what you think the HR department of the future kind of looks like. Who would like to go first? Sifo, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nishan. I think the future is still human. The issue is how do you embrace technology for that? And it's human beings that create all the innovations as well. So technology, AI is not our enemy, we create it. I think what does it mean for HR for me is that I think HR should be data fluent, tech enabled, but deeply role modeling empathy in the organization that comes through employee experience as well, because if you want to retain talent, that is critical. And then the last thing for me is that even our operating model as human capital, it should be a networked model where you bring in marketing people, data scientists in HR, not all the time, because we have to look at HR solutions as products, not processes. With a lifespan and through continuous improvement, it becomes very compelling for people as well. So we're not a department, should be highly networked in the business to actually drive solutions that matter.
Fantastic, Sipo. Nice thoughts there. Anyone else would like to jump in and round this off? We've said it all, but thank you very much for that, colleagues. We are on the half hour, so that's the full session now run the hour and a half. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Again, industry leaders shaping up the next generation coming through, and that's what the intent of this session was all about. Thank you for sharing your insights, and we'll see you on probably another panel. So take care, and to those that joined us online, we hope you found the value and the importance of these kind of sessions and shaping what the future of HR kind of looks like. Again, thank you and goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.